Have you ever noticed that moment when a woman starts pulling away, acting distant, and you're left wondering what happened? Maybe she's stopped replying to your messages or seems less engaged than before. It's a frustrating situation that many of us have faced, and it can feel like you're losing control of the connection. There's a saying that goes, when she pulls away, give her space, don't chase her. But what exactly does that mean in practice? In this video, I'm going to show you the right way to respond when a woman starts acting distant. You'll learn the key actions that will help you maintain your value, regain her interest, and keep the relationship from slipping away. Stick around till the end, because I'll share insights that will change how you handle these situations for good. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. It's tough when someone you care about starts pulling away, especially when you're trying to figure out what went wrong. You might feel like you're on edge, unsure of how to act, and wondering if you're doing something wrong. Your first instinct, though, is often to react emotionally. But here's the truth, staying calm and not reacting emotionally is probably the best thing you can do in that moment. I've learned this the hard way, and let me tell you, it doesn't just help you, it helps the situation too. There's a quote by Viktor Frankl, a psychologist who survived the Holocaust, that's always stuck with me. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. The moment a woman starts acting distant, you're going to feel the pull to react, whether that's frustration, confusion, or even anger. The emotions are valid, they're real. But here's the thing, you get to choose how you respond. This is where your power lies. I remember a time when I was seeing someone, and things started to feel off. She stopped texting as much, her responses got shorter, and there was this quiet distance I couldn't ignore. Naturally, I panicked. I'd start overthinking, replaying conversations in my head, wondering what I could have done wrong. I'd even send a few "Hey, everything okay?" messages, only to get more distance in return. It was like a spiral, one I couldn't break out of. But one day, I decided to stop. I told myself, okay, I don't have control over her actions, but I do have control over how I respond. Instead of sending those anxious messages, I focused on myself. I spent time doing things that helped me clear my mind, working on my fitness, hanging out with friends, diving into a book. I realized that reacting emotionally wasn't just making me feel worse, it was also making the situation feel heavier. The more I leaned into calmness, the more I noticed that I was thinking clearer. And you know what happened? The space I created gave her the breathing room she needed to process whatever was going on. Sometimes, people pull away not because of you, but because they're dealing with something within themselves. If you react emotionally, it can add pressure, and nobody wants to feel that pressure when they're already in a place of internal conflict. But if you stay calm, you create a peaceful environment, and that can be far more inviting than all the anxiety and worry in the world. This isn't about suppressing your emotions, it's about giving yourself the time and space to understand them before acting on them. It's about showing restraint and understanding that emotions, like waves, come and go. And if you can wait them out, you might find that the clarity you gain during that wait is exactly what's needed. Ultimately, it's about confidence. Confidence that you don't need to chase answers or try to control every interaction. It's knowing that no matter what happens, you're okay. That's the kind of emotional stability that can be incredibly attractive, not just to women, but to anyone who's looking for a partner who's grounded. Staying calm is less about keeping your cool for the sake of it and more about showing that you trust yourself and the process. So, when she starts pulling away, resist the urge to react emotionally. Step back. Breathe. Choose your response wisely, because in that choice, you'll find your power. When someone you care about starts acting distant, it can feel like the rug has been pulled out from under you. You want answers, you want to fix things, and your mind is spinning. It's only natural to want to reach out, to fill that silence with messages or questions. But here's the thing, Sometimes, the best thing you can do is nothing. Sometimes, what she needs the most is space to process her feelings. I've been in situations where, instead of letting someone breathe, I'd press and push, trying to get clarity, trying to figure it out. But every time, it just made the distance grow. It's like trying to chase a butterfly. If you move too quickly, it flies away even further. I've learned over time that when a woman starts pulling back, it's often a sign that she's sorting through something, whether it's something internal or something related to the relationship. And in those moments, the best way to show you care is by giving her the space she needs. Here's a little personal story. I was once in a relationship where things were going well, at least, it seemed that way on the surface. But then, out of nowhere, I noticed her withdrawing. The playful texts stopped. The long phone calls became shorter. And my first instinct? I wanted to fix it. I tried to talk to her about it. I tried to push for answers. But the more I pressed, the more she shut down. I didn't realize at the time, but I was suffocating her. I wasn't allowing her to process what was going on in her own mind. And here's the thing, emotions are complex. When someone feels overwhelmed, stressed, or conflicted, sometimes they need time to figure things out. And that time doesn't come when someone is in your face asking what's wrong every 5 minutes. That's when I learned an important lesson. Giving her space doesn't mean giving up, it means you respect her process. Women, like all people, need time to process their emotions, to reflect on what they're feeling and why. It's an act of trust, both in her and in yourself. It's trusting that, by stepping back, you're allowing her the room to work through whatever might be going on without feeling pressured or rushed. Now, I know it's hard. It feels like every moment of silence is another opportunity for things to unravel. But think about this, when someone is feeling overwhelmed, the last thing they want is someone crowding them, making them feel like they need to perform emotionally. And I get it, this space thing is tough because you might start wondering, is she just losing interest? What if she doesn't come back? It's a fear I've faced too. But remember, giving space is an act of emotional maturity. It shows you understand that the relationship is built on more than just constant contact, it's about emotional security. A good friend of mine once told me, if she needs space, give her space. If it's meant to be, she'll come back to you when she's ready. It's stuck with me. Sometimes, relationships need time to breathe. And when you respect that, it can lead to a stronger, more understanding connection when she's ready to talk. So, next time you notice her pulling away, resist the urge to chase after her. Give her room to breathe. Trust the process. Not only will it help her work through whatever she's feeling, but it'll also help you maintain your own emotional balance. In the end, space is a gift, one that shows you care enough to let her process things in her own time. And that's something worth respecting. When a woman starts acting distant, it can feel like you're walking on shaky ground, unsure of where you stand. Your mind races with questions, your confidence takes a hit, and the instinct to do something can become overwhelming. But here's the thing, in those moments, the best thing you can do isn't to chase after her or try to fix things. No, the best thing you can do is focus on improving yourself and your own life. I get it. It sounds counterintuitive, right? When someone pulls away, you want to do everything in your power to close the gap. You want to show them that you care, that you're worth their time and attention. But here's a reality check. When you start focusing on yourself, you not only increase your value, but you also give yourself the clarity to see the situation for what it really is. Trust me, I've been there. I remember a time when I was seeing someone, and things had been going great. Then, suddenly, I noticed her withdrawing. She stopped initiating texts, her responses got shorter, and I couldn't help but panic. What was happening? What did I do wrong? I started obsessing over every little detail. Should I text her more? Should I call her? But every time I did, it felt like I was just making things worse. I was putting more pressure on her, and it was suffocating both of us. That's when a close friend of mine pulled me aside and said something that stuck with me: focus on you. Work on your life. She's not your project. You can't fix everything, especially not someone else's emotions. Those words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been so focused on her that I'd forgotten to invest in myself. So, I took a step back. I put my energy into my own growth. I started hitting the gym more consistently. I dove into learning new skills, things I'd been putting off for a while. I threw myself into my work, putting in those extra hours, pushing myself to improve. I rediscovered passions I had let slide. And here's the thing, something shifted. Not just in her, but in me. I began to feel more grounded. I started to realize that my worth wasn't tied to how much attention I got from her, or anyone else for that matter. It wasn't about validation, it was about self-improvement. As I focused on building myself up, I noticed that my energy shifted. I was more confident, more content, and I wasn't waiting around for external validation to define my happiness. Now, I know that sounds like a cliché self-help mantra, but let me tell you, it works. When you invest time in developing your mind, your body, and your spirit, not only do you become a more attractive partner, but you also become less desperate for someone else's approval. Your life doesn't revolve around whether she's texting back or how often you're seeing each other. You start living for you. Psychologically speaking, when we are constantly seeking approval or validation from others, we end up becoming emotionally dependent. But the more you focus on your own personal growth, the more you create emotional independence. You no longer rely on someone else's actions to define your emotional state. This is empowering, not just for relationships, but for life in general. So, when a woman starts acting distant, instead of spiraling into anxiety or chasing after her, focus on building a better version of yourself. Pour your energy into your passions, your health, and your goals. By doing so, you not only improve your life, but you also give her space to process things, and most importantly, you show her, and yourself, that your life is already fulfilling, with or without her. Remember, you can't control her emotions, but you can control your own. And when you focus on yourself, everything else seems to fall into place. When a woman starts acting distant, the urge to ask what's going on, or are we okay, can feel like a reflex, something that must be done right away. I get it. You want clarity. You want to understand, to make sure everything's fine. But here's the truth, communication is key, but pushing for it at the wrong time can make things worse. I've been there, trust me. There's this tension that builds when someone pulls away, and the first thing you want to do is bridge the gap, get that emotional connection back. But in my experience, trying to force the conversation rarely leads to the breakthrough you're hoping for. Let me explain why. There was a time when I was seeing someone, and she started to pull back. I didn't know why, but I could feel the distance. My first instinct was to dive right in, be the open communicator I thought I should be. So, I'd text her, "Hey, is everything alright? You've been acting distant lately, and I'm just trying to understand." Or even worse, I'd approach her in person with a heavy heart and ask the same thing, repeatedly, until she'd finally give me a response. It wasn't until a close friend of mine pulled me aside and said, "You're putting too much pressure on her, man. If you keep forcing this conversation, it's only going to make her want to retreat even further." Those words hit me like a brick. I hadn't considered that I was pushing too hard. I was creating an environment where she felt like she needed to justify her emotions, when what she probably needed was space to process those feelings in her own time. Here's the thing, communication is important, but timing and tone matter more than we realize. You don't need to immediately demand answers. Sometimes, the best way to approach a situation like this is to communicate openly, but give her the space to come to you when she's ready. I've learned that emotional space isn't a signal of disinterest. It's often a sign that someone is processing their own emotions, or maybe they're just figuring out what they really need. When you try to force a conversation before they're ready, it can feel like an interrogation rather than a healthy dialogue. It's crucial to respect that time. In fact, when I started to adopt this mindset, giving her space and waiting for the right moment, things started to shift. You see, when we communicate openly and calmly, it shows maturity and emotional intelligence. It says, "I'm here, and I want to understand you, but I'm also respecting your need for time." Instead of demanding immediate answers, you can create a safe environment where the conversation can unfold naturally. I'm not saying don't talk about what's going on. That's important. But don't turn every silence into an interrogation. I've found that sometimes just saying, "I've noticed a change, and I'm here when you're ready to talk about it," is enough. It lets her know that you're available, but that you're not going to force her to open up before she's ready. Psychologically speaking, forcing someone into a conversation before they're emotionally prepared can trigger resistance. We all have our walls up, and when those walls feel like they're being pushed, we tend to protect ourselves even more. But when you communicate openly without pressure, you allow the other person to let their guard down on their own terms, which leads to a much more productive and honest conversation. So, the next time you notice her acting distant, remember this: communication is key, but don't force it. Approach the situation with empathy and patience. Give her the time and space she might need. And when the moment is right, open the door for a conversation without the pressure. Sometimes, the best way to connect is by giving the other person the freedom to come forward when they're ready. When a woman starts acting distant, it's easy to jump to conclusions. Maybe she's lost interest, maybe you've done something wrong, or maybe you're just not meant to be. But here's the thing, sometimes, the distance can be an opportunity to reassess not just the relationship, but your own needs as well. I've been in relationships where I kept pushing forward without truly reflecting on what I needed or what was truly going on. I remember a time when I was dating someone and, out of nowhere, things started to change. She pulled back, became distant, and I found myself spiraling, replaying every moment, every conversation, trying to figure out what went wrong. I was so caught up in the fear of losing her that I completely ignored the fact that this was an opportunity to check in with myself. I've learned that when someone starts acting distant, it's actually the perfect moment to pause, breathe, and reflect. Not just on her behavior, but on your own feelings and needs. In those moments of uncertainty, instead of seeking all the answers from the other person, it's important to ask yourself, what do I really need from this relationship? Am I getting those needs met? Is this relationship still fulfilling for me, or have I been settling for something less than I deserve? I'm not saying that every time someone acts distant, the relationship is doomed. But here's the truth, relationships aren't static, they evolve, and so do the people in them. And sometimes, we get so caught up in trying to hold on to what was that we forget to consider what is. Relationships should be a source of mutual fulfillment, not a constant guessing game about where things stand. One thing that really helped me through this process was a conversation I had with a mentor. He said, "Don't cling to something just because it feels familiar. Check in with yourself. Are you really happy, or are you just afraid of change?" That shifted my whole perspective. I realized that sometimes, we hold on to relationships not because they bring us joy, but because we fear the unknown. We fear being alone, or the discomfort of facing our own unmet needs. But staying in a relationship that isn't aligning with who you are or where you're going isn't doing anyone any favors, least of all yourself. Reassessing your relationship isn't about blaming the other person or pointing fingers. It's about taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture. Is there a lack of communication? Are your emotional needs being ignored? Are you growing together, or have you started growing apart? These are tough questions, but they're necessary. And when you start to ask them, you begin to see more clearly what your heart and mind truly want. Let's be real, we often think that relationships will just work if we want them bad enough. But sometimes, they don't. Sometimes, they require effort from both sides, and sometimes, that effort isn't there. It's hard to admit, but it's essential for growth, both individually and as partners. Asking yourself these hard questions doesn't mean you're giving up on the relationship. It means you're honoring your own emotional needs. If after reassessing you realize you're not getting what you need, it might be time to have an honest conversation with her. But remember, this reflection isn't just about her, it's about your own growth, your own happiness, and your own journey. So, next time you find yourself dealing with distance, don't just assume it's the end. Take a step back. Reassess. Look at what you really need and whether this relationship is still aligned with who you are and who you're becoming. And if it's not, that's okay. Growth often comes from moments like these, and sometimes the most empowering thing you can do is to choose what's best for you. If a woman starts acting distant, knowing how to handle it can make all the difference. Don't chase, just focus on yourself and let things unfold naturally. If you found this advice helpful, make sure to hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more insights. Leave a comment below with your experiences or questions about dealing with distance in relationships. Stay calm, stay centered, and remember, your value doesn't change based on anyone else's actions. I'll see you in the next video.